On July 9th, 2025, the Ukrainian Security Service arrested two Chinese citizens, a father and son, on suspicion of espionage for attempting to obtain classified documents related to the country's defense systems. This marked the first time in Ukrainian history that Chinese citizens were arrested on espionage charges and held criminally liable, clearly revealing the depth of Chinese intelligence activities in the region. One of the arrested individuals, a 24-year-old man, had once been a student at Kiev Technical University. However, he was expelled from the university in 2023 due to poor academic performance and remained in Ukraine despite this. He attempted to approach individuals connected to the defense industry and establish relationships with companies interested in military technologies by presenting himself as a businessman or investor. However, his true objective was very different: to obtain classified information about the RK-360MC Neptune cruise missile system, one of Ukraine's most strategic military weapons, and transfer it to China. The plan was meticulously crafted. The son positioned himself as a knowledgeable and influential investor, participating in various events, fairs, and technology forums to gain access to his target. For several months, he attempted to infiltrate engineering networks and find ways to access military facilities. Shortly thereafter, his father, who was overseeing the operation, also arrived in Ukraine, and they began coordinating the process together. Their primary objective was not merely to steal documents, it was to collect sensitive technological information, analyze it, and sell it to foreign powers at the highest possible price. At least that's how it seemed at the moment.
However, the Ukrainian intelligence service had been monitoring the duo for months. All communication channels were under control. Their conversations were monitored, and the details of their plans were analyzed. Ultimately, on July 9, 2025, the father and son spies were apprehended in a professionally executed special operation at a hotel in Kiev. During the search, encrypted communication devices, several memory sticks, flash drives, hidden cameras, and high-precision equipment were seized. It was determined that some of the information stored on these devices was ready for sale at a high price. The initial investigation revealed that the Chinese spies were not only gathering information about Ukraine's military systems, but also attempting to establish connections with critical engineering personnel, gaining their trust to infiltrate the system. SBU officials described this operation as one of Ukraine's most sensitive security operations, noting that it prevented classified technologies from falling into the hands of third countries. Currently, criminal proceedings have been initiated against both individuals on charges of espionage and disclosure of state secrets. If the court finds them guilty, they face up to 15 years in prison and confiscation of all their property. However, this is not merely a legal matter. It has also raised a number of important questions. The most significant of these is whether China carried out this operation in its own interests or as part of a secret collaboration with Russia. This is because the technological information that was sought to be stolen pertained to strategic systems that were of interest not only to Ukraine, but also to Western military alliances and NATO. Ukraine views this espionage attempt not only as a military success, but also as a diplomatic one, because thwarting such an operation in the shadow of information wars is of vital importance for safeguarding the country's technological sovereignty. So what is the Neptune system and why is it so important? RK-360MC Neptune. Despite its simple name, it is the pride of Ukraine's military-industrial complex and a weapon of strategic importance. This system is one of the boldest steps Ukraine has taken toward producing independent military technologies, breaking away from its post-Soviet legacy. And precisely for this reason, it is of interest to both enemies and spies. In fact, Neptune is a Ukrainianized version of the Soviet-era X-35 missile, a prime example of new spirit in an old body. But it would be inaccurate to call it merely a modernization. These missiles are entirely domestically produced and now meet NATO standards. Technically, these cruise missiles, approximately 5 meters in length, can fly up to 280 kilometers and strike their target at speeds of hundreds of kilometers per second. They are launched from land, guided by GPS and inertial navigation, and in the final stage, they activate their own radar to locate the target. To put it simply, it strikes from a distance, strikes accurately, and strikes covertly. But Neptune is not just about missiles. It is a complete system, a complex comprising mobile launch vehicles, radar stations, transport loading trucks, and command control centers. This is not a truck that comes to the shore, launches a missile, and leaves. It can remain hidden along the entire coastline, maneuver, monitor the sea with radars, and respond within seconds. This is of vital importance for Ukraine, especially in a tense region like the Black Sea. In 2022, this system achieved historic success when Russia's Moskva missile cruiser was hit. 2 Neptune missiles struck the ship, and the result was dramatic. The flagship sank, the Kremlin was humiliated, and the balance of power in the Black Sea shifted. At that moment, Neptune became not just a weapon, but a symbol. For Ukraine, it was a symbol of "we can do it." For Russia, it was a warning that the technology against us is no longer ours. The Neptune system is not only a defensive weapon, but also a geopolitical tool. Its existence makes it difficult for Russia to plan coastal operations. Russia's landing preparations around Snake Island had stalled due to fear of such weapons. The missiles, equipped with radar systems, have the ability to detect and strike any maritime target at any time, which means Ukraine has full control over its own territorial waters. For all these reasons, information about the Neptune system, its software, technical designs, and control algorithms is considered top secret military information. If these documents fell into enemy hands, Ukraine's missiles could suddenly become obsolete and defenseless. At the same time, this would pose a serious threat to cooperation with the West, as Neptune is a system of technological importance for NATO as well. This is precisely why it makes perfect sense for Chinese spies to attempt to obtain the documents related to this system. The most critical question surrounding this incident is, were Chinese spies operating in Ukraine solely for Beijing's interests, or was Russia also involved behind the scenes? The clear answer to this question is not yet known. But one thing is clear. China's view of the Ukraine-Russia war is not simple and straightforward. Officially, Beijing is taking a neutral stance, proposing peace initiatives, encouraging dialogue, and declaring that it stands equidistant from both sides. The Chinese Ministry of Foreign Affairs constantly emphasizes that it supports a diplomatic solution to the conflict and is not arming either side. But the situation on the ground is quite different from these claims. In reality, China has been deepening its military, economic, and technological ties with Russia, one of its closest strategic partners, for many years. Energy supply, high-tech trade, and geopolitical coordination with Russia appear to contradict Beijing's neutral image. In this context, the espionage issue, particularly the attempt to obtain information about the Neptune missile system, can now be seen not just as an intelligence operation, but as part of a larger strategic plan. The prevailing view among experts is that China is not directly involved in the conflict, but is helping Russia indirectly by supplying technology, transferring dual-use components, and providing opportunities to circumvent sanctions. The fact that Chinese spies are attempting to gather information on strategic weapon systems, such as Neptune, indicates that this support has moved beyond the economic realm and now extends to the military and technological spheres. According to some reports, China has sent drone components, electronic equipment, and materials used in ammunition production to Russia in recent months. If these reports are confirmed, then the espionage operation cannot be explained solely by Beijing's own interest. It could also be a coordinated step to enhance Russia's war capabilities. Here, China's multi-layered balancing act in foreign policy also stands out. On the one hand, Beijing does not want to spoil its economic relations with the West, while on the other hand, it is strengthening its strategic relations with Russia in the format of unlimited friendship. This double game causes China to approach this conflict both as an observer and an indirect participant. Ultimately, the motivation of the Chinese spies is not yet entirely clear. However, given the scale of the incident and the critical nature of the target, the version that this initiative was carried out solely for individual gain does not seem credible. This espionage incident in Ukraine can be seen as a concrete manifestation of Beijing's official neutrality, unofficial intervention policy. Therefore, the question remains unanswered. Is China playing this game for itself or for Russia? Write in the comments what you think about this. But whatever the answer may be, this incident shows that China is no longer a passive observer standing on the sidelines of this conflict. Let's take a look at the following incident as an example. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky made important statements to journalists on April 17, 2025. Zelensky stated that, based on information obtained by Ukraine, China had sent weapons, gunpowder, and artillery shells to Russia. He also noted that Chinese representatives were involved in the production of weapons on Russian territory.
Отримали нарешті інформацію, що Китай поставляє зброю Російської Федерації.
Zelensky's statement raised questions about the authenticity of Beijing's official neutrality in the war. According to the Ukrainian leader, China is not content with merely partnering with Russia. Beijing has clear interest in preventing the Russian army from suffering a complete defeat in Ukraine. The Chinese side immediately and categorically denied these allegations. Foreign Ministry spokesman Lin Jian described the accusations as groundless in his statement on the matter and emphasized that Beijing has not sent lethal weapons to either side, but rather is trying to promote the peace process. Official Beijing once again declared its support for a ceasefire, diplomatic dialogue, and a peaceful resolution to the conflict. However, despite these diplomatic statements, new detailed information revealed in May 2025 by Ukrainian military intelligence chief Kirill Ivashenko shed a harsher light on the situation. Ivashenko confirmed that China supplies gunpowder, electronic components, and high-tech equipment to more than 20 military factories located in Russia. The most striking point was that 80% of the critical drone components currently used by Russia are of Chinese origin. These figures reveal that China-Russia relations have moved beyond the framework of political and economic cooperation, with a serious trend toward integration in the military-industrial sector.
There's more. In March 2025, a video spread on social media and caused a stir. The video shows two people wearing Russian military uniforms speaking Chinese. The footage was shot inside an abandoned, half-demolished building. Among the notable details in the video is one of the individuals writing in Chinese on the wall, "Li Jingjing was here." The other individual's uniform clearly displays the emblem of Russia's famous BARS unit. The video also includes a short dialogue in Chinese. One person says they wrote it wrong. "Ah, I wrote it wrong again." This shows that their native language is Chinese and they are only wearing Russian uniforms. These images have raised the possibility that there may be Chinese fighters within the Russian army. Ukrainian analyst and former advisor to the Ukrainian Ministry of Internal Affairs, Anton Gerashchenko, shared this video on social media and commented, "Chinese fighters may be on the Russian side in Ukraine." This statement has further fueled questions about Beijing's role in the war and raised the possibility of a deeper military alliance between China and Russia. Although the video has not yet been fully verified by independent sources, the spread of the footage has caused great concern in the international community and especially in Ukrainian society. This has reinforced the idea that there may be new and more secret aspects to China and Russia's military cooperation. In the bigger picture, China sees this conflict as both a risk and an opportunity. On the one hand, Russia, weakened by sanctions, plays the role of a geopolitical asymmetric partner for Beijing, providing it with a cheap energy and resource market. On the other hand, Beijing is using the lessons learned from this conflict as a strategic laboratory for future Taiwan scenarios. The response of NATO and Western coalitions, the effectiveness of sanctions, and the outcomes of information and psychological warfare, each of these is a valuable experience for China. However, China is striving to keep its unofficial role as invisible as possible. For this reason, it denies any involvement in arms supplies, but continues to provide indirect support through elements such as drone parts, dual-use technologies, and semiconductor equipment. China is also assessing its growing interest in the post-Soviet region within this context. Beijing is seeking to expand its influence in Central Asia and is analyzing developments in Ukraine as part of its geopolitical rivalry with the West. Thus, the Ukraine-Russia war is important for China not only in the context of its relations with Russia, but also in terms of consolidating its position in the global power struggle. However, this situation is not limited to China. In the complex international environment where the war continues, Ukraine faces serious challenges not only in the military sphere, but also in the diplomatic arena. Global South countries, such as India, Brazil, and South Africa, which are trying to maintain a neutral or balanced stance, are concerned about the effects of the prolonged war on global energy and food security. However, they are cautious about the West's pressure policies, which makes it difficult for Ukraine to obtain their open support. Therefore, Ukraine is directing its diplomatic efforts toward strengthening relations with its Western allies. Cooperation with countries such as the United States, the United Kingdom, Germany, and Poland is being deepened, and negotiations are underway within the framework of NATO and the European Union on security guarantees and the establishment of long-term defense capabilities. At the same time, Ukraine is trying not to sever ties with neutral and undecided countries, as these countries can play a mediating role in peace processes. This diplomatic strategy aimed at reestablishing international law and justice is essential for strengthening Ukraine's long-term defense capabilities.
Thank you for watching. Bye for now.